Alrighty. Well, my name is Brooke. Nice to meet you guys. This is Crystal. We are currently in programs to become BCBAs, and we work at the Rochester Center for Children as some of the senior therapists there. And today we're going to talk about some positive approaches to dealing with challenging behaviors. And let me know if you can't hear me. I can always talk louder. So first, we wanted a quick little overview. So today we're going to talk about the functions of behavior, and that goes with some of the ABCs, which we'll talk about a little bit later. We've got how to use reinforcement, some prevention strategies for challenging behaviors, and then responding to challenging behaviors once they do occur. So to go over some of that, first we have what is behavior? And behavior we want to look at as observable and measurable things. And so observable means things that we're able to see or otherwise experience. So like I can see a child on the swing. I can see like each instance if a child hits. Those are observable things. And measurable means that I can see it in both duration and frequency. So duration means how long it's happening. So I can see how long we're sitting at the table and eating and measure our behavior in that way. Like we sat at the table for 10 minutes, we sat at the table for 15 minutes. And then frequency is how often something happens. So each instance of a behavior, like each bite we're taking at dinner time, or how often we're jumping. And so behaviors are things that are both observable and measurable. We can see them, we can hear them, and we can also count them. And so we just had this question, are these things behaviors? And I'll go through each of them. So being happy is an emotion, and it's not in the sense that we're talking about it, a behavior, but we can look at some of the behaviors that go along with it. So if somebody's smiling, if they're laughing, those are behaviors. Eating breakfast was the example that I was using, is a behavior. We can, again, see how long we're staying at the table, see how many bites somebody's taking. That's both observable and measurable. Hitting is another example of behavior. That is something that we can count how many times it happens. We can see it, we can feel it. And then going on to the next one, being naughty. I may have a definition of what naughty is, but my definition might be different from Crystal's. And so that's not something that we would consider a behavior in the sense that we're talking about it. But again, we can look at the associated behaviors. So maybe being naughty for this child includes having a tantrum, which we can describe and put into measurable words. And then we've got laughing and yelling at your sibling are the last two. Those both are observable and measurable things that would be considered behavior.
So next, we're going to look at the functions of behavior. There are 4 prominent functions, as you see listed. These functions allow us to understand why someone engages in specific behavior and how we should respond to decrease the behaviors associated with these. So the first one you'll see is sensory. Sensory is a self-reinforcing behavior that occurs when a person, their own movement or actions feel good to them. So a simple example for this one is you get a bug bite and you scratch that bug bite. You're engaging in that behavior because it feels good to scratch an itch. Next, we have escape. Escape is a behavior that occurs when a child wishes to avoid, delay, or end something undesirable. Another simple example for this one is when our kids engage in stall tactics before bedtime. Next, we have attention seeking. This is a behavior that occurs when a child desires feedback or response from their peers or adults. For our kids, good and bad attention is an adult construct. This means that, us yelling at them is still giving them that attention that they're seeking for. They don't differentiate between like getting a high five versus like being put in a timeout. Regardless, it's still that attention. A simple example of this one is when we buy a nice car, because we want that attention from other people. We want them to look at us. We want them to ask questions about our car. And lastly, we have tangibles and access to activities. This is when a child engages in a behavior because they want access to that item or activities. An example of this one is, you know, our kid hits another kid because they want the toy out of their hand. Yeah, and it's important to remember that behaviors aren't always specific to one function. Sometimes behaviors have multiple functions that they're associated with. So some more examples listed on the board. For sensory, listening to music that sounds good to you, having the TV on the background for noise. For escape, a child is told to make their bed and they run out of the room. So they're trying to escape the demand of making their bed and they're kind of dipping out. Then we have dropping to the floor and crying when it's time to get on the bus, you know, because if they're dropping and crying, they're attempting to escape going to school. We have attention seeking, hitting siblings when mom is busy cooking dinner, because then maybe mom will come over and, you know, give them the negative attention of don't hit or have nice hands. Then we have running away from dad at the park because we want him to chase after us. And lastly, our examples for tangible, screaming at dad until he gives the child his phone, or hitting another child to take their toy.
Okay, and then we've got the ABCs of behavior. So this is an acronym. A stands for antecedent, and that means something that happens right before a behavior of interest. And then B is for the behavior. So what happened right after the antecedent, and it's usually the behavior that we're going to be looking at. So something that might be a challenging behavior, but it happens with both good and or with both challenging and with socially acceptable behaviors. And then we have the consequence, what happens right after. And that's what we're going to look at a lot with whether we are strengthening the behavior or weakening the behavior. We're going to look at the consequence. So what happens right after the behavior. Example to help out with this a little bit. So the antecedent might be mom unloading groceries and filling up a cookie jar. And the behavior is reaching for the jar and crying. And that behavior is then followed by mom handing the child a cookie. So in this case, the child is crying to gain access to the cookie. So going back to the functions, that would be tangible to be able to get something. And this is likely going to increase this behavior because it resulted in the preferred item. So they were able to get a cookie once they tried, and it's going to strengthen that behavior. So something that we look at a lot in the clinic and that can be helpful is finding a socially acceptable replacement behavior for it. And so for this case, we might teach the child how to ask for the cookie, or if we have a nonverbal child, we might have them command using sign language or with symbols to be able to ask for a cookie. And so in that case, we would have mom unloading groceries and filling the cookie jar, and then the child would learn the replacement behavior of asking for a cookie to receive the cookie. In that case, that replacement behavior is easier to use for the child and is going to be more functional for them and for the family as well. So we're trying to really increase behaviors that are going to be functional for them and the family and help replace the challenging behaviors that we're looking at. But again, the consequences are what really strengthens or weakens the behavior. And so in this case, the crying would no longer receive cookies, just asking for cookies would receive cookies.
So now we're going to look at reinforcement. There are two types of reinforcement. There's positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. When you think of these two, think of like math terms. Positive means that you're adding something in. So with positive reinforcement, we're adding in a preferred item or activity. For example, when a child completes their chores after school, they receive money or access to a tablet. Versus negative reinforcement is the removal of a non-preferred item or activity. So Once again, for example, when a child gets an A in math class, they can pick a chore that they don't have to do for a week. So you're moving that adversive stimuli of engaging in chores. And it's important to remember that we intentionally reinforce behaviors we want to see more often. So how to decide if something could be reinforcing. Look at, is this something they enjoy? Is this something they seek out? Do they seem excited about it? Are they willing to complete a difficult task to have access to this item? And have they had access to the item all day? We know that when we have access to something more often, we're less likely to want to engage with it. So just notice whether or not they've been engaging with this for a while. And then how to increase the value of a reinforcer. We can get excited about it as ourselves as adults. We can get involved and play with the child. We can engage with the toy in a new way, find different ways to, whether you're building with blocks or playing with dolls, different way to engage them and bring in other reinforcers to play with as well. And like we talked about, limit access. If a child has access to the TV all day, they're not going to be as excited about watching more TV versus if they've only watched TV for 5 minutes, they're going to want to watch more.
Okay, so going on to some things to do for challenging behaviors. So first off, what is a challenging behavior? We want to really send home that it is something that is currently functional for the child. It serves a function for them, and that's really important to note. And another part of challenging behaviors is that it's something that restricts their access to coursers, to different settings, and to activities. So it's something that's making their world smaller. And we are looking to replace it with behaviors that are able to make their world larger. So some examples for challenging behaviors and how they might restrict your child's settings and access to new things. We have tantrums. So the child may no longer be able to go to the grocery store with their parents, which makes it so that they're not able to select the type of snack that they want because they have tantrums in the grocery store. It may prevent the family from going out to eat together, and that's really restricting everyone's setting. And then we also have aggression. So a child might engage in aggression at school when they don't want to do whatever task is presented at school. And then that's going to lead to a more restrictive setting. So they're not able to be around as many peers or get the educational opportunity that they might otherwise be able to receive if they weren't engaging in aggression or if they were engaging in some replacement behaviors. And then we also have hitting their sibling. They might not be allowed to play independently with their sibling then. Next, we have elopement. So there might be locks on their doors at home if the child frequently elopes from the house and now they're no longer able to go on walks with the family. Or the child may not be able to play at the park because they have a history of running while they're at the park. And so it's really restricting their setting there. And then some things with self-injurious behavior, it comes in a lot of different forms. We might have a child who engages in head hitting, and that will result in possibly mitts. They might have to wear a helmet for their own safety. And that's something that can be harmful for both them and their family out in their natural environment. And super intense behaviors might result in needing to go to the doctor or extra hospital visits. And so really looking at these challenging behaviors and trying to find replacements for them so that they're able to access some more of the reinforcers, the new settings and activities that we really want the kids to be able to access. And another thing that we just really wanted to drive home was that words matter, how we talk about things, how we go through things. So as Crystal said before, attention is attention. We may view it one way, but our kids don't necessarily view it as two different types of attention. And so receiving attention in the form of reprimands is still attention. And so we really want to try to bring attention to the behaviors that we do want to see. So if your child is climbing on the table, say like, hey, we can stand on the floor, we can sit in chairs. Like these are the options that we know that are available. And that's another thing, is bringing attention to behaviors that we do want to see. If I tell all of you, do not think about elephants, that's the one that we always go with. That's exactly what you guys are going to think about, because that's what I've brought up. And so if we have a child who throws their toys, we can try really hard to bring attention to when they are playing with their toys appropriately, or if they set their toys down when they're finished. Like, hey, I love how you're keeping those on the table. That looks amazing. So that they really know, oh, that's what I should be doing. Like these are the behaviors that are going to get me this really awesome attention, get some new toys when I'm engaging with them appropriately. And the second thing, it says, do not place a demand if you can't follow through. We know that this isn't realistic in every single setting, but when we're able to choose our battles and pick the demands that we are really important to us and are really functional for our child, to be able to follow through with those ones. So writing it out, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in some of our following slides. But our kids pick up on things really, really quickly. And so which things are going to be followed and which things aren't. And so really seeing like this one's important for you as a parent, and this is the one that I want to follow through on today. And like on the next time, it might be a lot quicker because they said, oh, mom followed through on this last time, so she'll follow through on it this time, and it might not last as long. And then our third one is to be mindful of what you say and how you say it, especially if you have kids in the clinic. What you'll hear a lot from us is that we're talking about their positives and their successes from the day, just so that when we're around the child, they're hearing the things that they are growing in. And that helps us with a growth mindset as well. So we're seeing the progress that they are making every day. Like, hey, this part might have been difficult, but here's something that they did really well today. And maybe our behavior was shorter. So like we were able to get to a new activity a lot sooner than we otherwise would. Then a little bit more with behavior management. So this is when a behavior does happen. So we do have a challenging behavior. This is what we would like to try to follow through with. So first, de-escalating. We are having time for both the child and the parent or the caregiver to de-escalate. We're not going to have reinforcement available at this time. It's just a time to cool off for everybody. And again, not negotiating at this point. We really want the parent or the caregiver to remain in control of the situation. And during times of escalation, the child's not in a point where they're able to learn and to recognize that something needs to change. And so it's really something to like take a step back. Everybody takes a deep breath. We can do some of the calming strategies that have already been put in place. Again, this isn't a time to necessarily figure out new things, but to work through some of the things that might already help. Like if our child gets very escalated and we know that ice and a quiet dark room home, like those might be something that we'll go to, but we're not going to try out new things at this point. And then next we want to follow through. So once we follow back down, following through on that instruction and not placing additional demands. So right now we're focused on the one demand that is either the most important or the one that was placed directly before the behavior, so that we're seeing like, hey, now that we're home, we still need to do whatever the thing was. So we still need to put on our shoes. We still need to, get in the car so we can go to the store. And this may take a long time, is what our next point is. And again, it's not realistic to follow through with every single command. We understand that it's not realistic to follow through every single thing. But again, if it is something that you're able to follow through with at that point, to really be prepared that it might take a long time if the behavior has been reinforced for a really long time, if it's been strengthened for a really long time. So in our earlier example with the child who yells and screams for cookies, it might take a really long time to get that behavior to not occur as often or not occur at all, because maybe they've been yelling for cookies for 2 years. That's a long time for that behavior to have worked. And so showing them like, hey, this one's not going to work. We have our other option. We can ask for cookies, we can sign like food, and those things are the things that are going to get you cookies. Screaming is not going to result in cookies. And then third is to reset. First, to try not to hold on to negative feelings. This one can be really, really hard, but to just kind of try to remember that it's not personal. Our child is going through a hard time. They're not intending someone else a hard time. It's a hard time for themselves. And if available, taking a break, both for the caregiver and the child, can be really helpful. If you just helped your child through de-escalation and trying to then help yourself, just take a minute and breathe is also good. And then last, we want to reinforce. So we want to bring ourselves back in and reinforce the behaviors that we do want to see again. Just focusing on the ones that we do want to see and a little bit less on the ones that we don't want to see. And it'll be hopefully easier to follow through the next time too, if we reinforced exactly what we do want to see. And it'll help with consistent expectations too, of like, hey, we follow through, now we're reinforcing what we do want to see. And this also will help with the repairing process. So we want to pair ourselves with the really fun things and really exciting things. And so when we reinforce our children for the things that we do want to see, this helps with that pairing process to bring it all back together and have us in a good place together. And then post behavior, we have some questions that you can ask yourselves. That one came out real light. So first, what went well? What's something that might work well for next time? Like maybe having the lights turned off, that really helped us to calm down and reset a lot faster than it usually does. What did not go well? And that's something that we aren't going to do again next time. Try something new, which goes into what would I do differently next time. So like maybe the lights turned off worked really well, but when we tried to bring in some of the other calming strategies, those ones weren't so effective this time. Yes, that one says, what did not go well? That's really light. Yeah. And then the last is, what do I need to learn more about? And this is something that you can reach out to your support system for. If you have a care team for your child, that's a good set of people to reach out for. If you don't have a child who's currently receiving services or on the wait list for services, a support system is a good resource, even if they're not currently in the field. If it's grandma, mom, any kind, there's lots of friend groups on Facebook that would be good resources too for some of the support things.
So you've heard Brooke and I talk about replacement behaviors a little bit already, but to dive a little bit deeper, replacement behaviors are behaviors that are substitutes for our challenging behaviors. These replacement behaviors promote our success in their schools and across their daily lives. These replacement behaviors should serve the same function to the child as challenging behaviors. So if your kid always engages in tantrums when they want to have ice cream or a treat, the replacement behavior that we're teaching them should result in them having access to that ice cream or that treat. And these replacement behaviors should be taught outside of challenging behaviors. So we shouldn't be teaching them when our kids are really escalated. We should be teaching them before, after they've calmed down. So for an example, if we know that our kids tantrums when they want ice cream, we could have them verbally ask for it or sign for it before they engage in a tantrum. Or if they've already begun tantruming, help them calm down and de-escalate like we talked about, and then prompt them to verbally request it before giving them that ice cream. Okay, so behavior prevention. First, we want to establish a relationship, which sounds silly because a lot of these kids, like, we should already have a relationship with them. But identify whether or not the kid's like seeking you out to play and have fun. Because this can help you realize whether or not you're reinforcing to the kid, whether they want to play with you. Next, motivate, find motivation. The level of motivation should match the task or demand that we're placing. So for example, if we're just asking our kids to pick up their socks, maybe they have access to the tablet for 5 minutes. But if we're asking them to clean their entire room or the lawn or the living room, then maybe they're getting access to that tablet for more like 20 minutes. Next, we should know expectations and abilities of our kids. So what's the kid's tipping point? What can they do? What can they not do? What do they need help doing? So we know that our expectations are matching what they're capable of. Next, we should understand triggers. So if our kids are triggered by really loud noises, identify that. Be aware of when, where, and what the behaviors are occurring. Next, structure. Structure the environment based on known abilities. Set time limits for activities that you know are difficult, and slowly work to increase that time. So an example here is maybe you start by just having your kid pick up a couple toys on the ground and then slowly work to having them clean their entire room. But working up to that and not just right away placing the demand to like clean their entire room. And lastly, reinforce on-task behaviors. Catch the child engaging in those good behaviors are the ones that we want to see more often. So next, behavior prevention continued. Have fun and think about ways that you can build that positive and trusting relationship with your child. Just taking 5 to 10 minutes a day to do something that your kid wants to do and what they find interesting. Identify your child's interests and engage with them by questions or partaking in that activity. We can offer preferred activities for free sometimes. Don't always associate them getting the tablet with having to do something hard. Sometimes just say, yeah, you can go watch the tablet. And lastly, be honest and forthright about the kids' schedules and any changes that might arise. We know sometimes our kiddos can get very fixated on structured schedules, and sometimes changes happen, and we just need to be honest and give them warnings about those changes that happen.
And then some things to keep in mind, just bringing it back. Don't take the behaviors personally. It's really hard to do sometimes, but just really realizing again that your kid is going through a hard time. They're not trying to put you through a hard time. And be the giver, not the taker. As you've heard through a lot of our presentation, is to really do the reinforcement. So adding things for the behaviors that we really want to see instead of taking away things for the behaviors that we don't want to see. And then to be proactive. A lot of the things that we've talked about today. So trying to put in those prevention strategies, finding the calming things before we need to use them, and having these things in place, making ourselves really reinforcing before we need to ask our child to do something really different. And some other little reminders, there's no quick fix, especially if a behavior has been occurring for a really long time. It's going to take quite a long time or it can take quite a long time to establish a new one. So if we have a really long history of the screaming for cookies being reinforced, then it's going to take a lot longer for us to establish the new behavior. There's no one size fits all. A lot of our kiddos on the spectrum also have siblings on the spectrum. And so something that works for one child probably will not work for another child. I had one of the kids that I worked with was very into fresh vegetables. I've never had another kid that would work for, but it worked for him. Was just very into those. And so again, it's not one size fits all. We really need to cater it to the child's specific. What are their interests? A lot of our kiddos have really specific interests. And so we can cater our strategies to them. We've got some kids who really like the deep input, and a lot of kids don't like to be touched at all. So really just figuring out what works for your child and trying to build around that. And then the last one, punishment does not teach a child what they should be doing. Again, with our replacement behaviors, trying to show them what they should be doing. We should be, asking for things that we need, whether that's sign, through a lot of kids use tablets now, or through our vocal speech. There's a lot of options for that, and rewarding these behaviors that we do want to see. So like, oh, you picked up these 5 toys. That's so awesome. We kept our toys on the table while we played with them. We were able to stay by mom in the grocery store for the whole trip. These are all some things, and just really focusing on those instead of punishing our behaviors that we don't want to see, because that really might just make the adult who's taking things away more of a punishment than we would like. We really want ourselves to be reinforcing so that we can work with our children on really difficult tasks. And some final thoughts, just some reminders. These challenging behaviors do serve a function. We just want to help them find something that's more socially acceptable or easier for them to do. It's a lot easier for me to ask Crystal to move than it is to push her down so she's out of my way. So learning some behaviors that are just more socially appropriate, that still serves the same function. So an example that we had on here for a behavior that's serving a function is screaming for attention when your parent's working on the laptop. With so many people working remotely now, that's a fairly common thing. And so being able to reinforce the behaviors that we do want to see, like saying, hey, look at me, or putting their hand on their parent's arm so they know that they want attention from their parent. Just being able to find those behaviors and tell our kids exactly what they should be doing. And again, reinforcers are very specific to our kids. Some kids really like Legos. Some kids hate Legos. Some kids love to be picked up and spun. Other kids get nauseous and it's not for them. And before challenging behaviors occur, we went through some options to help prevent them, to really make the environment able to support the child working through some more difficult tasks, and to help them always come up with some more calming strategies that work for your specific child, to figure out when we do have the challenging behaviors. And just a reminder for those 4 things, when we do have challenging behaviors, to de-escalate, follow through, reset, and then thank you guys. Is there anything that you want us to go back to that might be helpful?
We have time, I think, for Q&A too.
Okay,
so.
perfect. Yeah, if there's any questions, if there's anything that you want us to go back to that we went through a little too quickly.
Have a question?
If not,
It's nice to see the first page.
absolutely. The first slide, let me bring you up there.
Let's start with one.
We did not, we just went too quick.
Yeah.
Next one, sure. Okay, that's totally fine. No, you're good. I can just scroll through it for you.
Okay, thank you.
That one, okay.
I have a question about the whole even a behavior infection.
Mhm.
There are certain behaviors that really require immediate attention because
Mhm.
they're dangerous.
Yep.
Or they're just completely inappropriate.
Mhm.
So how do you do that without feeding into their need for attention, whether it's positive or negative attention?
Again, that's really specific to the child, because there are some, like if we're in public or if we're at home, you're gonna have a very different reaction to the behaviors, right? And so if it's something that's in public, then, and this again is so dependent on the child, on how big they are, what you're comfortable doing, exactly what the behaviors are. So there's no like one size fits all. But I know one thing that we try when we have some of our attention seeking behaviors in the clinic is to really just like not provide necessarily like eye contact with it, to just have a really neutral tone, because there is some research where the tone plays a large factor. And so there might be a behavior that a child is engaging when the therapist is trying to investigate exactly how that's happening. The attention that we give might not have the same tone, whereas a parent or somebody else in the community might have a really large reaction to it. And that's really what they're looking for. So it's very variable. Respond.
I think it's important to remember too, like, we're not ignoring the child, we're ignoring the challenging behavior. So if a kid runs out of this room, I'm still gonna chase him and I'm gonna block him from getting farther for safety reasons. But I'm not gonna bring attention to like, oh, we can't run, or we need to stay in the room. We're just gonna walk him back and ignore that he ran out if it's for attention.
My question, so my 6-year-old, a little different from his older brother, both of them are autistic. First one is just the dream child, like no behavior, very mellow, very chill. Second one is just very different. So he loves to jump from the couch and from things, and now he got into going, but he just loves jumping. So he will be, I'll blink and he'll be on top of the bar for a bar placement. I mean, it doesn't have, obviously we're using it, but like the height, him, is very scary. Like, what if, and so like I typically when I notice him, I do notice my tone goes up because I'm shocked, surprised he's there. I run to the rescue. So obviously my tone is different than what he's used to. But then when I bring him down, do I not say anything?
That's another one. You could also focus on what we could be doing. So I know I had one of the kids that I used to work with was also very into jumping. Again, not prescribing anything because each child is different and I haven't done anything with your child specifically. But for that one, we had some replacements, like they had a trampoline, those tiny little exercise trampolines. So like if it was the jumping or if it really is the attention, then there's like other options that you can teach him. Like once you bring him down, like here's how we can get mom's attention. Some just like other options depending on exactly why it is happening.
Do you work with third kids as well? I always hear about this.
Yeah, at this time, I think at our center, it's fairly young because we work at the Rochester Center for Children right now. But I used to do in-home with kids up to, I think my oldest was 19. So yeah, I've kind of worked across the birth to 21 age range for kids with using ABA.
I was just gonna say, I think at the clinic right now, like we work with kids up to the age of like 12-ish. Yeah. But there are definitely resources for the older kids too.
I have a question about kids too. So so if your child has things that they like and they misbehave, you're able to, take that item per se, like, do a consequence. But what if like you're not home? Like, let's say, for example, and you don't have the tablet that you're gonna say, oh, no tablet for 30 minutes or whatever. Okay, how do you do that? It's not in front of them and they can't see So like if my child is playing with his tablet, they misbehave for some reason, I'm like, sorry, tablet time's over. You know, I take it, they're grounded for a little bit, then they get it back, right? But
Okay,
if we're not home, if he doesn't have this reinforcer in front of him, how do you do the consequences? It's gonna happen. My son didn't grasp the concept of you're in trouble, but you'll be in trouble later. Like, how do I do that? You know what I'm saying?
With like reinforcement, it's really important to be like really immediate, so they do like make the connection. Um, that's kind of entering more of like punishment stuff if we're taking those reinforcers away. And so
So would you let it slide if,
maybe identify different reinforcers that you do have in the environment if he's. Maybe you have a better example for this.
so, part of what we've been talking about is really focusing on the behaviors that we do want to see. So maybe we have a child who engages in hitting, and so if the tablet is something that they kind of always have access to, then we're gonna see something else that they really like. So the child that I had who liked veggies, we might have them only available for if we have positive interactions with our sister. And so each time that we're engaging with our sister and we're able to give a hug or like be able to play for 5 minutes and be like, hey, like we did a great job. We're going to leave that situation that we know is really hard and go to the reinforcement that we know is really highly preferred. And so it's helpful to have kind of a grab bag, more or less, of things that you know the child really enjoys or really enjoys maybe doing with somebody else. So if it's a game like Skip-Bo, they might like to just play with the cards by themselves, but they might like to play with somebody else. And so, like, hey, we had a day where you made it through school without running out of the classroom. Like now you get to play Skip-Bo with mom today. And that's something that we only get when we have that positive behavior that we do want to see. And so really reframing it in like, these are things that are extra that we get access to the behaviors that we really want to see. And again, these aren't necessarily exclusive to that time. We can do freebies just to keep ourselves reinforcing as well. But to just really focus on like reinforcing the behaviors that we do want to see. Because again, if we are taking away for behaviors that we don't want to see, it's not telling them what we do want them to do. And so it's just, it can be easier to focus on the behaviors that we do want to see. Thanks,
I'm
guys.
sorry, I have so many questions.
That's
I'm
okay.
sorry.
If you got
That's what
another
I-
one, go for it.
So my youngest one, the jumper, I have a hard time finding a way or thing that he likes. He just taps and jumps. Like his biggest it's not really a reinforcer, but like his ideal day is I take him to the trampoline park and he doesn't have it when I do that, right? But he doesn't have a thing that he likes at home. I'm having a hard time finding what he loves, so I can be like, hey, you get it with good behavior, or I think you're like bad behavior. So what would you do if we don't really know how to play with the tool appropriately? Like all he does is that with any two items, it could be an amazing toy, but he doesn't care for it. He'll just do this. No tablet, no TV, no nothing. He has really no motivators.
It sounds like he's really into sensory stuff, if he's liking that sensory input of jumping on
Jumping,
trampoline
yeah.
and the sounds of like clicking stuff. So maybe you want to look at a bunch of sensory toys, whether that be like poppets or musical stuff, or just more like that sensory input that he can get from toys versus like our idea of what functional play is.
Yeah.
That's my idea. Just try out some of that stuff.
I think it helps too, to try to get excited about it yourself. Like we have so many different options at the clinic that kids might not know how exciting something can be. Like we have this little toy microscope that I was like, I'm interested in that.
Yeah,
Let's see what we can do. And the kids are like, I don't know. Well, yeah, like that's not that exciting to me. But then I turned it into a game. So we went outside and we were spies. So we found evidence that we could then look at under the microscope. And then the microscope was the high thing for the day.
yeah,
And so just trying to be creative, and as adults, that can be really hard, to be creative and try to find new ways of using things. So like building the blocks into something that they can use. I know we frequently do like castles and things like that. But just trying to find a new way that might draw our kids in. Like, oh, that is actually really exciting. Like, I want to be a spy and find some evidence. Like, that sounds awesome. And so then we kind of create some more reinforcers.